Welcome to The Come Up. My name is Matt, and on this episode, a conversation with my ex-show husband, Ali Louis Bourzgui. Ali and I got to play opposite one another for 4 months on the national tour of Company before he left to go play the titular role in the Broadway revival of The Who's Tommy. When we had this conversation, he was in a brand new musical called We Live in Cairo about the 2011 Egyptian Revolution down at New York Theater Workshop, the same place where Rent had its New York debut. And I thought this would be the perfect opportunity for us to go deep and reflect on his experience on tour, what it was like to make his Broadway debut in a leading role of that size, and now what it means for him to be a part of a new musical that humanizes Arab people and Arab culture at this particular moment in time. You know, one of the things that I love about doing this podcast is that I get to meet people that I otherwise wouldn't have, but it is so special when I get to talk to people that I know and love, and Ali is definitely in that category. He is smart and kind and warm and goofy and insanely talented and generous, and if you don't love him already, I know you will after this. So, without further ado, here's my conversation with my sweet, sweet friend, Ali Louis Bourzgui. Can you believe here we are sitting across from each other? We're not getting married.
We're actually getting divorced. That's what this podcast is going to be.
This is the divorce podcast.
You're going to listen to couples counseling.
That's right. Exactly. We're going to parse through all of our couples problems, all of our marriage issues from our 4 months or however long we were not getting married. You left the tour in January. Since you left, obviously so much has happened. I'm curious, in reflecting on all that, what that experience of those 4 or 5 months doing that show meant to you, and also like how that affected how you ended up showing up for Tommy and Cairo, like how you walked in the room, if that experience had an impact on that.
I feel like it was a totally unexpected thing, and it was such a blessing of a little moment, just because Tommy was just such an intense process, both in Chicago and in New York. And it brought me so many amazing things. And I also had a great time, but it just, leading a show, but then also leading a show that's that like emotionally intense and that vocally demanding is just, it's kind of isolating in a weird way. Like it just, you have to reserve so much energy in order to do it at your full capacity and to give it the amount of respect it deserves. And also the fact that like when you are a singular character like that, and then the rest of the show is mostly like an ensemble, there kind of ends up being this sort of separation that's just naturally created, and you have to kind of work in order to sort of fight against that. That's not the actual people. I mean, like the ensemble was wonderful, and they were constantly coming in my dressing room and checking in on me, and it was just like I went from doing that and being so in that, and then when I got back to New York, I immediately started rehearsing for Company, and I was tired, and also like, again, jumping a whole new process with a whole bunch of new people. Like I was so, I remember specifically thinking it was like so many new beginnings of like having to restart the cycle of completely reintroducing myself to a whole new group of people, and then that again and again and again. And it was like the 4th time in a row where I'd joined a new cast and like I didn't know anyone, and suddenly I had to like, and I'm such a, we've talked about this, I'm like such a shy person in the first few weeks, so it takes a lot for me to sort of open up and like really trust a group. So I remember thinking like, oh my God, a whole other group of people where they don't know me and I have to completely start from scratch and like try to open myself up slowly. But I remember that once we really like got into it, and we I think it was Schenectady, like I started to realize like how much that specific group of people and you guys were like such a blessing in my life at that time. And it was just such a light-hearted group. And also, this show is a blessing too, just to be able to play a character that suddenly was just like very caring and open-hearted and smiley and goofy. And it was helpful for me after playing such a sort of dark, intense character. And it was also just helpful for me just going through that time. We kind of started the show in October of last year. And just like everything that was happening in the world was just so heavy on all of our hearts. And to
Yeah.
be able to kind of play a character that listened and that was open-hearted, and to have a scene partner that also, was the same. And we just kind of shared this like moment of what it truly means to meet someone where they're at in terms of their emotional state, and just kind of letting them be there and then listening to them. I see those like 4 months as a little mini blessing, because it brought me so much joy, and kind of recentered my heart. I felt like we just laughed so much. We laughed so much in this. It was great. Like that whole group, and we were just goofing off the whole time in the best way. But
Yeah, it was chaos.
yeah.
It was chaos.
I also, this is just a technical goofy thing, but I remember thinking, I was like, oh, I'm gonna get my little like baritone break. I'm gonna be able to be Paul, and this part is like such a, like it's gonna be just nice, velvety, like smooth. It's gonna be easy on the voice. And then we were in the rehearsal room, and all of a sudden, like, I was getting put on all of these like alto parts pretty much. Suddenly Paul, like when he's not singing his normal stuff, is singing like the highest parts in the show. But in an odd way, it like, because it's Sondheim, and because it's sort of more of a classical sound, singing like that in sort of like a mixed register, it got my voice in this like really strong place, so that when I went back to Tommy, I actually felt so much more vocally strong from singing in that style. But not like, in the rock style, it doesn't necessarily feel like stamina training as much as it is just like sprinting. Like every time you do it, it's just like, it's kind of intense, and then you have to do maintenance afterwards and like fix it. But with Sondheim and like a classic Broadway sound in that same range, it's kind of, you're safe, and you're kind of doing it in a again, like a stamina way. It almost felt like weightlifting, so that when I got to Tommy, I had those notes then with a muscle to them, with a strength to them, which was really helpful.
I agree with all that. It's very emotional for me to hear you talk about it. It was just the wildest time, and so much humor and so much goofiness. And as a sort of curtailment to my next question, like, that last like month that you were there, when we came back in January, there was a sense, obviously we knew that you were leaving, and you knew you were leaving, but there was a sense from other people in the company too, that it was like you opened up in a different way. I had seen it the whole time. Like I cracked you in the first week because you had no choice
Yeah,
to be with
exactly,
me.
exactly.
But with the rest of the group, it was like people were so surprised.
Yeah.
I remember like Judy being like, "Oh my God, I had no idea like how goofy he was." And I was like, "No, you really have no idea."
Yeah.
And what's interesting is when you went to Tommy, I had heard from people in that cast that you walked in that room with more openness. And obviously you had been with them in Chicago,
Mhm.
right? You had this prior bond and this prior experience, but there was a feeling from people in that room that you came in with more goofiness than you had maybe in the last process
Mhm.
of doing Tommy. I don't know if that was because of being around the company people for 4 months and the insanity that was going on there,
Yeah.
but you talked a little bit about it. But I'm curious, like, after having been with this group of people in Chicago and having this prior bond and built that foundation, when you came in, when you guys started rehearsing in New York, and then really through the whole run, like, I'm wondering about what the experience was like with that, being with that group of people again, and having to go through the experience of Tommy as a whole and having that group there.
Well, I think I learned something during the 4 months of company. Well, there's a couple things. I learned how to stop. I'm still working on this very actively, but I took my first steps in learning how to stop taking myself so seriously. Like, I think I feel like there was just a lot of years, and then coming into this too, like, um, I really wanted to be seen like seriously. Like, I've always been a very goofy, just like kind of, you know, ridiculous person at heart. But I've always kind of been taken a little, like, I've always felt a little underestimated in many spaces, at least just growing up. And so I think then when I actually entered the like professional adult world, I was like really craving a being seen as like an adult, or being seen as like a really serious, like hardworking person. That was like an image that I wanted to create. And that's important a little bit, but then it kind of gets in your way at a certain point. And I also think that I started to get this feeling in the first couple shows I did, where I was like, whoa, okay, now I'm really seeing how this whole career is like bonding with this group of people, becoming like super intimate and close to them, and then immediately saying goodbye, and then getting like your heart broken by like this entire group being gone, and then you move to the next one, and then that happens again, and then it happens again, and that had happened to me like 3 times. So then I kind of got this mentality of being like, you know what, I'm gonna close off my heart and not open it completely, because it just hurts too much to like keep doing this over and over again. But I think what I learned in those 4 months of company, then going back into Tommy, was it's actually worth it to just keep doing that and not to like try to block anything off, because it's going to happen. It's inevitable. It's going to happen anyway. And it's so much better to experience that. It's so worth the heartbreak for the time of how great it is when it's actually happening. And then no one ever, goes away. I mean, like, I just saw you this weekend, and it lives on outside of that like context. But I think I got a little jaded and closed off because of that feeling, and then realized that that's not helpful at all, actually. And then just the seriousness thing, like I remember specifically too, even more so in Tommy than Company, in the Chicago version, I really entered that space being like, I remember the first day we all were like sitting for music rehearsal, and people started to file in, and everyone was like mingling and hugging and talking, and I was just sitting in my chair just like waiting for the music rehearsal to start, and I didn't mingle. And one person came over to me and tried to talk, and I I was polite and said hi and everything, but I didn't. I was like, nope, we're here to work. And then when I did Company and then went back, I felt so like renewed in terms of taking the parts seriously that need to be taken seriously, but being a lot more open to the fact that like shyness and being closed off in any sort of way is just, all it does is just hinder me, and it's not helpful for anyone. So I don't know, I felt like I got cracked open a bit.
I can certainly say that I saw that progression happen in you, that I watched the sort of coming into the room being like, I am here for a job, and this is a very serious job, and we're doing a Sondheim. And then in the course of those 4 months, watch that. I don't want to use the word unravel, but that's a fun word for it. But it just more is like, it is an embracing of like a lightheartedness and the balance, like a finding of the balance of like, this is serious and I need to warm up every day and make sure that I'm like in good enough shape to get the job done and like be there and show up on stage, because that is what I'm here to do, is to work, but also enjoy myself while I'm here, and like be able to have that sort of social aspect or bonding with the people around you. Because ultimately, when you go through something like a show that's a tour or a new show, any experience, a regional show, the people are the thing at the core of it that I think maybe make or break it. Like ultimately, the experience is the experience, but when you walk away, I found the first thing that people asked me was like, when people are like, how was the tour? I'm like, oh my God, I walked away with some incredible relationships, because that's what I spent the majority of my time doing. It wasn't doing the show. It was the days and the time I was spending with we spend more time in the rehearsal room together than we do actually doing the show.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, like, in this sort of headspace of like bringing lightheartedness and what to take seriously, there obviously was an expectation from some people that you would be nominated for a Tony for the performance in Tommy. There was an expectation that the choreography would have been nominated, and that the show itself would have gotten more award recognition. And I think when we spoke, you had told me you were in the park with your friends that day. That was like what your Tony nominations day was. You were like hanging out in the park with your friends. And I'm curious, because we haven't really talked about it since then, if that was an indication of that entire sort of award season and what it ended up being for you. And if it changed your perspective on awards and accolades just in general and as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, I I learned so much about like why I'm doing this during the award season. Um, I think I think the awards are so important for keeping our business going and for getting eyes on shows that really need it. Um, and I think it's a really lovely thing to celebrate people's work. And you know, I've always watched the Tonys, and I root for it, and I pick my choices. And I think it's a great thing to get like excitement and buzz around the business, and it's wonderful. But I when I was going through the awards season process, I felt so the most like unlike myself I've ever felt. Um,
Huh.
I did it, and I went again. I learned how to like give enough of myself that was you know, at a respectful level, and again, I respect the whole process of it. But I kind of realized like, oh, this is not what I pictured the like a Broadway thing to be. And I noticed that in many ways it took me away from the actual uh, process of the show. Um, and
Huh.
I felt like because I was putting so much energy into the award season, I didn't have as much energy as I'd like to have actually be putting into the focus of the show. And the minute sort of fizzled out and ended, I was like, oh, now I can like actually put all this energy into the show. And then I felt so much more in the show once that kind of had um, fizzled away, but also then we closed. So I only had like a week of that sort of catharsis. But um, I I yeah, well that day you know I looked at the nominations, didn't get it, and got a bunch of calls being like, you know, I'm so sorry, and I was like, right now I am at the park with a bunch of my friends that I haven't seen in like 2 months because this has been such an intense schedule, and we're all just hanging out outside, and I'm like hanging out with my friends and having like a life outside of my job. And um, in another universe where a different outcome would happen, right now I'm in a giant convention center with 400 interviewers talking from 9 to 5. So as an award would be wonderful, I also kind of at this point in my life, like just now, I had this headspace where it's like, this is my Broadway debut, or it was my Broadway debut, and also my debut of playing a leading character in a show this big. That's enough for right now. Like, I'm 25, I was 24 during that show, and like I'm a person that likes to set goals and slowly work towards them. It's kind of like how I really thrive, and how I've like discovered like if I have a deadline and a goal at a certain point and I can slowly work towards that in a patient, like slow manner, that's very healthy for me. Getting a lot of things all at once is very confusing for me because then I'm like, oh wait, what do I do now? So I think it was a blessing in many ways to just at this point for this show just have the checklist of Broadway debut, like leading part. That's so enough for me. And what's so enough for me was getting to do a show with 15 other Broadway debuts and like really great friends, and all of us like performing this high octane show that brought so many dads joy.
Including yours,
Yeah,
including
including
yours,
mine.
which is an important point.
It brought so many people joy, and we had such like one of those like lovely what you want, like, you know, those sort of like little cult followings. Like we had a group of like Tommy fans, and I wouldn't change anything really that happened. It was perfect. Um, and more so than the award, like the process taught me so much again about like what I want. Like it's not, words are great, but I realize it's all about the collaboration for me, and all of the best parts of the show for me were the times in the room where we were like coming up with things together. And there were like two moments in the show where it was a full ensemble moments where all of us were all on stage, and it was in Act 2 where we just there was kind of a nonstop moment where we were all going, and we all just got to this intense part where we were all breathing heavy, and we hadn't been off stage in like 10 minutes. And that sort of ensemble moment is just a magical thing. Those are just the times when I feel like, oh yeah, this is like why I'm here.
That all tracks.
Mm-hmm. The best thing was that process was it just taught me how to say no sometimes, and also when to protect my peace, and again, how much of myself to give to people, because no matter how many interviews you do and how many people's eyes are on you at all times, and every second of the day you're being perceived in some format, whether it be in an interview in the morning, and then you're doing the show in front of hundreds of people, and then you're doing like a outside performance, like promoting the show, and then you're doing like this thing, it's like everything every day, and you're being perceived in some way. At a certain point, you have to just kind of figure out how to save part of yourself for yourself, and and just how to look out for other people too. And Broadway's great, but it's also a business, so sometimes people are gonna just try to take advantage of like how much they can use you for certain things, and at a certain point sometimes you just have to say like, what, actually I can't.
Yeah, I'm so proud of you and so happy to hear all that. And I personally, selfishly, Ali, like your experience through that whole process was super informative for me. It was so eye-opening in that sense that it was a refocus of like what's important.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why am I actually here? Like, what am I actually doing this for?
Yeah.
I don't know if you've had this experience, but it was very cathartic watching you and Tommy for me. And I'm finding more and more now that I'm back from tour and going to see shows, and I know people and pretty much everything I'm seeing, there is this joy thing. I don't know what it is, but there's this little light that I haven't experienced before in this particular way, that when I go see someone I know, or I go see a show and someone I know is in that particular show and they're working really hard, and if they're doing good work, that's even on top of it. But for me, it's more about like if I could see them, like they're working, like I can see the work that they put into that thing. It is so joyful
Yeah.
and so fulfilling as a friend and an audience member, but especially, I guess, as a friend. Have you had that experience with going to see people and stuff that you've just been like, oh my God, this is so amazing. This is so cool.
Yeah.
This is so fun.
Yeah. There's such a lovely moment when it's exactly that what you're talking about. It's seeing someone's like hard work and seeing somebody entirely pour themselves into something is just a beautiful thing. and same with I always love going to see all of David Cromer's plays, and though he's not in them, to see someone's like direction too is such a cool thing. Like to know how someone's brain works, and then see like how they create this story on stage, and you can again, they're not there, but you can like feel all of their hard work in like the whole piece is such a that's such a cool thing.
I felt that way about Cairo too, honestly. This is a character that is similar to you. It's closer to Paul than it is to Tommy. Obviously, there's like this goofiness and this optimism and this open-heartedness and this like soft boy thing that shines in this show that is you. Plus you're playing guitar and you are an Arab person in the show.
Yeah.
I'm wondering how being in this character, and you guys are still, you're in the process of it now, but I'm wondering like the day-to-day of being in this character, how it's feeling different from Tommy or Paul.
Yeah. This character is like one of the youngest characters I've ever played recently, or I guess professionally. Like I feel like every show I've ever done, I've played a character that might either be like older than me or like exactly my age, and this character is such a youthful soul, which I'm not used to, but which has been wonderful to kind of exist in. And he's the central optimist of the show. Everyone around him is very we're living in such harsh circumstances, being in Egypt under this regime, and I was saying to you, like I sometimes I struggle with how optimistic he is, and I consider myself to be a very optimistic person, but he is so optimistic that it almost enters into a naivete sometimes, where like he can't even see the world around him logically, and so
Mm.
that has been a fun experience to like play around with, because I reach a point where suddenly logic enters the space, and then I
Well, you're a very logical person too. You are like you are like you're
yeah.
optimistic, but you're very
Yeah,
logical.
so then the optimism drops once the logic comes in, but that doesn't happen for him. So it's been interesting to play with that. But this show has been another just like big learning moment for me in terms of so many things. Playing guitar on stage, it was a great challenge because I've played for so long, but I've always had this thing where whenever I play in front of people, I freeze up, and then all of a sudden I lose all my technique because I get so nervous about it. But I just had to do that every single day for the past 2 months. So now all of that has gone away, and now I can just play guitar like it's singing in front of people, and I've lost the that sort of tension that comes. So that's been a gift. And just proving to myself, and again, like I really, we all deal with imposter syndrome. I definitely do, and I often tell myself that I can't do certain things, and then so I've been trying to like take jobs where I have to force myself to like rise up to the occasion of what the show asks of me. Tommy, I didn't think I could sing that high. I almost declined the audition because I was like, this is way too high for me. I can't sing this. But then, I did it, and still kind of couldn't sing that high in Chicago, and then just had to work at it every day and bring myself to that. And then the show gave me this new range because I did that. And this show is now making me a better guitarist, which is great. But it's also at the same time showing me how art can be activism as well, and how you can take how art doesn't have to be separate from that. How it can actually, I've always seen it as a way to start conversations, which is great. But this also, in many ways, I feel like this show speaks to like the simplicity of where activism can start, and the idea that like this sort of core theme is I was one person who made it words, or who had an idea, who made it words, and someone heard. That general sort of revolutionary idea that it always starts from one person, and it feels so often to us that we feel helpless in bigger issues, but it's always one person that then starts a whole movement. So that's been inspiring to me, and also I think so many of the root issues are dehumanization, and also starting to like not remember that mass groups of people are individuals. And so it's so great that this show is 6 people, and you get to see each of their lives and the nuance of each of their lives, and the humanity. And again, it's the nuance. It's like the show shows the beauty of Arab culture, and then also shows that there are really difficult things and difficult ideologies, and fights between our ideologies, and moments of intense violence, but then moments of intense love and beauty and language and food and community. And it's all of these things. And to ever look at the culture as just one of those things is such a disrespectful thing. And so this kind of celebrates the 360 full humanity of Arab people, which I think is often left out of the narrative. Or it's not even just left out of the narrative, but just like outside of like stories and theater, people only, even if you don't think you do, if you kind of like process how you've seen Arab people in Western media, it's always this very stereotypical one-sided way. And there's not a lot of, for American people, there's not a lot of ins in terms of seeing anything but that, because there's not a lot of movies or theater that you might see for other cultures, unless you like actively seek it out. And it exists in other countries, but not really so much in the U.S.
Not really
So
here.
it feels like a very historical moment for us to have a musical that's all Arab. Like, it's crazy.
I want to go deeper on this, and I'm gonna take a sidestep, and then I promise it'll loop back around. But being in that space as an audience member, it was fun and cool to feel the presence of New York Theater Workshop in that room, and Rent specifically.
Mhm.
Um, Especially, I just think for theater people, it's so significant for me at
Yeah,
least.
yeah.
It's so significant that it's hard for me to be in that room and not think about Rent, at least a little bit. And one of the lines in Rent that was really present for me, especially in reflection, was something that Mark says towards the end of La Vie Boheme. He says, "The opposite of war isn't peace, it's creation." And it feels like this piece is not only in its content, because that certainly is true, but in its existence, in and of itself, it is a counter to war and hate and dehumanization and tribalism. And I'm curious what doing this piece with this group of people at this moment in time right now, what that means to you.
At the beginning of the process, like, this was a group where, again, it was like 6 of us, and we all just immediately like loved on each other and just held each other, because we, even though we didn't know each other, we just like know what we've been feeling for so long, and beyond a year, our entire lives.
Yeah.
And there's kind of an unspoken understanding that we all share. And we immediately brought that into the room with each other, and we didn't even have to talk about it, which is one of the beautiful things of culture. And one of the beautiful things that comes out of experiencing like microaggressions your entire life, as negative of a thing as that is, like, it then creates a space that we all understand, and we've
Mm.
all worked and it's made us empathetic and made us open-hearted to other people and other minorities. And it's one of the reasons I've always wanted to tell stories, is to kind of open up the human heart and soul to like underrepresented groups, or people who don't have a voice. And so in many ways, this show has felt like giving a voice to people who haven't had a voice. I mean, I also, like, if we're just talking about Egypt specifically, which the show is about, like, I didn't really know anything about the Egyptian revolutions or anything that happened in 2011. Like, I remember
Nope.
seeing it on like CNN at that time, and it just was videos of like Arab guys with like flags, like, and doing this and like throwing like Molotov cocktails, and it was just like they just showed the violence of the protest, and I remember being like, that looks bad.
Yeah.
When meanwhile this show is showing like how beautiful it was, and what actually happened was that it created this utopia in the center of the city. And it was a secular thing, Muslims and Christians, and um, everyone was just like coming together and existing for one cause. Of course, then after they got their one goal, then all the opinions came in, and it fell apart like things usually do. But at least there was this moment of unity, and there's beauty in that. But it's I think at the core of it, the show is so much about, like, you can sit here and watch this story, especially like this weekend too. It's so much about an election, and it's so much about the power of
Yeah.
the people, and it's just so much about how oppression everywhere is the same thing. And like, you're watching this and you're like,
Mhm.
this isn't Egypt, blah, blah, blah. But like, I know this. I've seen this in Palestine. I've seen this here in the US for all kinds of different groups that are being oppressed. And it's always the same thing. And so these kind of stories are important, because it shows you that oppression just exists through all these different storylines, but in the same form. And the fact that all of our freedom is interconnected. Like, no one is free until we are all free. It's that that basic message, but that somehow always needs to be repeated to people. And the fact that no one group of people should have to audition for your empathy every day. But this is another kind of foray into that of, to be honest, us auditioning for empathy, of being like, see these people, these are real people based off of real people, who deserve a life from all sides, a life that has violence in it, that has beauty in it, that has love in it, that has, everything. And I don't know. I think it just reminds people. I wrote in my bio that no one should be just seen as collateral damage. Yeah, and we also had to talk as a group. Like, it kind of felt like, I mean, it feels like such a large undertaking and such a huge responsibility, because again, we're telling a real story, but also like right now being one of the only representations of the Arab people in terms of like Western media. It's we have 2 hours to tell the story, but then we also feel like this responsibility to get everyone's narrative in there, and to get all these like missions done and these stories that we want to tell. And so we had to like be like, what? So that's why we included this little pamphlet in the bio, kind of just like being like, I hope the audience can see us for our humanity and bring that out into the world as well. And there's also something beautiful I think we discussed and are doing, which is, and this isn't also like just a decision that we made just for the show. The keffiyeh is being worn by me and Rutana in the show, and it's a recontextualization, just in the fact that I think people are seeing that as such a sign of hate, or like this like symbol of like hatred, and it maybe some people might wear it for that, and that's deplorable, and I would hate for anyone to ever wear the keffiyeh as a hate symbol, but it's not at its core. And we wanted to take this moment in this show to show that it's always been a part of just the Arab culture. People were wearing it in Egypt, because it's, again, everyone's freedom is intertwined there. And it's this symbol of beauty, of being proud of your culture, being where you're from. It's just like, farmers used to wear it to get the sun out of their eyes while like tending to olive trees, and to like make sure that they could like wrap it around their face if there was like anything blowing. It's just like it's a garment that exists in the culture that's for hundreds of years, of just being like, this is us. So it's lovely to be able to wear that too, when that's been sort of a very big political thing recently, where people are being like hate crimes just for wearing them, or being called like all kinds of names for wearing them.
One of the other threads I want to pull on in the show is music. And obviously your character has a very specific relationship with music. And he talks about, everything from how he listens to music, right? Like that for him, melody is first, and that comes before lyric, but also what music is capable of, and what it means. And we talked a little bit about this, but I'm curious right now what role music is playing in your life as a whole. And also, because I know you, I would love to hear more about what role music has played in your sort of origin story, and how that's led to where it is right now in your life.
Mm-hmm. I mean, music is like everything to me. I got into music before I got into theater. I started with singing, and I've just always had music in my life since I was a kid. But yeah, for Amir, yeah, it's in the show. My character Amir, he sees the world through music. Everything is music to him. The revolution is music. That's how he is politically active, is writing songs that inspire people to rise up and to believe in themselves, and to listen to each other and to love each other. I mean, he says he does everything for love. Um, and I do believe that music has that power to help people learn how to love and to soften. I think music softens, and it softens everybody, and it's very important in that way. I mean, I think music in history has always been such a powerful tool to make people stop and listen and to bridge a lot of gaps. And it's no different from Amir. And the entire show, he's just trying to write songs that he thinks can fix the world, and that's imperfect. Unfortunately, it can, but unfortunately not always. So, but he will. The best thing about him is that he will try until the very end to write the song that is going to fix everything. And I love that about him. But yeah, for me, I mean, I have been playing guitar now for 4 years, and that opened a new door for me. Like, on the side, I've been writing music for like 4 years, and it's the way that I sort of help myself slow down and see the world. I've tried journaling for so long, and it just doesn't work for me. But I sit down and I'm actually the opposite. I write, I write music first, but then I guess I'm not the opposite. No, I write music first and then lyrics come second. But if I'm feeling a certain kind of way, I just sit down on my guitar and I just sort of play the way I feel. And then sometimes words come to that and I add that to it, or it's kind of the way that I sit down and open my brain up and see how I'm feeling and see how I'm seeing things. And oftentimes my songs are a bit storybookish, where like it starts like, oh, I'm in this bad place, but what if I reframed it to this way of thinking, and then in the end I've reframed it and put myself on an optimistic path. And so a lot of my songs kind of follow that form. And for the longest time I was like, if I ever want to release these are all going to be too like I think sometimes there's something to be said about a song that doesn't try to fix itself throughout it. Which I have written as well, but I think people need that kind of music sometimes, and I needed it, obviously, or else I wouldn't have written it like that. So it's honest. And one of my favorite artists that we've talked about a lot is Jacob Collier, and he says a couple things, which is write music that you wish existed in the world. And so that's what I do all the time. I'm like, I write songs that I need, that help me with my current mental state, and I listen to them a lot because I'm like, I need this. It's so specific because I wrote it for me. I wrote it to get through something. And so why should I change it when that was like the most honest form of what I could write? And he also says, there's no rules. There's no rules in music. And it's oftentimes like when I think about my favorite artists, their songs don't follow a form or like follow any kind of rule. They just do it the way they wanted to do it. And that's always the best kind of music. So, but my roommate plays guitar, and we've been working on an album for like 2 years. And next month, December, we're going to start the process of recording it. And hopefully bring that out in the spring. So that's very exciting. Another little, I don't know, be my first thing like outside of like theater jobs, where it's like it's kind of something else that I've been slowly putting time into, but I'm going to take all of December to really just focus on that, which is great.
Such a gift to be able to do that, Okay, so we'll end here. What are 3 favorite theater pieces? Can be musical or plays.
Illinois has been on my mind since I saw it. I loved it.
Wow. Are you a Sufjan Stevens fan? Like, were you already? Okay.
Yeah. But I didn't know what to expect from the show, and I was crying the entire time. Just because this has also been on my mind for like a year now. It's one of the only shows I saw 3 times. But Kimberly Akimbo is still like one of my favorite things I've ever seen. I think I think that is like, it touched me so deeply. Like it's like the perfect example of a show that is so in its own lane. Like it was so like, this is the tone of our show, but also we're going to be so honest. Like it was just like another one of those like human condition shows where it just was so lovely. And I could tell that all the people on stage loved each other. and really believed in the story. And it was, I went back, literally, I saw it 3 times. And then I'm a big Pigpen fan. I love those Pigpen guys. So I love, they have this show called The Old Man and the Old Moon that I always think about. Like, it comes into my mind like once a week, and it's inspired like most things that I've written and created. I don't know if like anyone can find it, but I don't think there's like a video or everything, but there's some music online, and it's just, it's all of them, and they were all like on stage, and they wrote this show together, and they all played instruments on stage, and it's like a folk tale where they like travel around the world to find love. Like, it's beautiful.
Well, I am so, I love you.
I love
you
you too.
so much. I just feel so lucky to be your friend and to get to love on you, because yeah, I adore you. Thank you for this.
Thank you.